In this video, I am going to share with you a step-by-step pattern for making this cute dumbbell. So let's get started. Hey guys, welcome to DIY Crafts. For this, I am using a grey color yarn along with a crochet hook of size 3 mm. Now let us begin by making a magic ring. Adjust the ring and then make chain 1 to secure the magic ring. Now let's begin by making the row 1. For this, make 8 single crochet stitches into the center. That's 1. This one is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Now close the magic ring and then we'll start making the second row. Here we are following a spiral method. Make 2 single crochet stitches into the first stitch and then mark the stitch marker on the top of the first stitch in the increase, and this marks the beginning of second row. Now continue to make increases throughout the row until you reach the starting point. So we are making total of 16 single crochet stitches by the end of the second row. This is how the pattern looks after making 2 rows. Now remove the stitch marker and make 1 single stitch over the next stitch and put the stitch marker back to mark the beginning of the third row. Now into the next stitch, make an increase, that is 2 single crochet stitches into the same stitch. Now repeat this pattern of 1 single stitch and 1 increase throughout the row for total of 8 times. So by the end of the third row, you will have 24 single crochet stitches. So this completes the third row. Now remove the stitch marker and let's start making the fourth row. Make 1 single stitch and put the stitch marker back to mark the beginning of the fourth row. Now into the next stitch, make 1 single stitch. Now into the next stitch, make an increase, and now we are going to repeat this pattern of 2 single crochet stitches followed by an increase throughout the row until you reach the starting point. So here I am making the last increase of the fourth row, and this completes this row, and you will have 32 single crochet stitches. Now make 1 single crochet stitch into the next stitch and put the stitch marker back to mark the beginning of fifth row. Now continue to make 1 single crochet stitch in each and every stitch throughout the row until you reach the starting point. As there are no increases and decreases, the fifth row will also have the same number of stitches as in the fourth row, that is 32. So after completing 5 rows, here is the work. It should be flat and neat. Now let's continue to make the 6th row. For this, begin with a slip stitch. Now make chain 1. Now insert the needle into the back loop of the same stitch and then make a single stitch into that stitch. And this one is the first stitch of the 6th row. Now put the stitch marker into the first stitch to mark the beginning of the 6th row. Now continue to make 1 single crochet stitch in each and every stitch, and remember to insert the needle only into the back loops, leaving the front loops. So this creates a line like texture, and this gives the partition between the side of the dumbbell. So after completing all the stitches, remove the stitch marker and then make 1 single stitch over the first stitch in the 6th row. You don't have to make any other slip stitches and everything. You can just continue to work spiral way. So now put the stitch marker back to mark the beginning of the 7th row. Now for the rows 7, 8, 9 and 10, continue to make 1 single crochet stitch in each and every stitch. This gives the first part of the dumbbell. Now continue to make 1 single stitch for the 7th, 8th, 9th and also the 10th row. And this is how it looks like, the first side of the dumbbell, making the last single stitch of the 10th row. Now remove the stitch marker, and for the 11th row, begin with a slip stitch, chain 1 and into the same stitch insert the needle only into the back loop and make one single stitch. Now put the stitch marker to mark the beginning of the 11th row, and then continue to make one single crochet stitch into the next stitch throughout the row only into the back loops, leaving the front loops. So this will create another edging on this side of the dumbbell, and as there are no increases and there are no decreases as well, so in the 11th row also you will have 32 single crochet stitches. So this completes the 11th row. Now remove the stitch marker and then make one single stitch on the top of the first stitch. Now put the stitch marker back to mark the beginning of the 12th row. Here you can see the border which we have created using a front loops. Now into the next stitch make one single stitch, so you have 2 single crochet stitches. Now we are going to join the next 2 stitches using an invisible decrease. So insert the needle into the front loops of the next 2 stitches and then make a single stitch. So that's an invisible decrease. Now continue to make the pattern, 2 single crochet stitches followed by one invisible decrease, again 2 single crochet stitches followed by another invisible decrease, and likewise continue to repeat this pattern throughout the row until you reach the starting point. And by the end of this row you will have 24 single crochet stitches. As we have 8 decreases, the count will be reduced by 8. So here I am making the last invisible decrease, and this completes row 12 with 24 single stitches. Now remove the stitch marker and let's start row 13. Make one single stitch and put the stitch marker back. Now into the next stitches make an invisible decrease. Now repeat this pattern of one single stitch and one invisible decrease throughout the row until you reach the starting point. So by the end of the 13th row you will have 16 single crochet stitches. And as we are doing decreases, the shape will come closer to give the middle part of the dumbbell. So here I am making the last invisible decrease, and this completes the 13th row. So you can check the shape. Now let's add stuffing into the project. First stuff around the project and then stuff the center to ensure that the project is stuffed properly on all the sides. Also make sure to stuff good quantity so that it holds the shape. Now let's continue with the project. Remove the stitch marker and let's start making row 14. For this, make one single crochet stitch into the front loop of the next stitch. Instead of going into the entire stitch, put the needle only into the front loop. And then make one single stitch and put the stitch marker to mark the beginning of the 14th row. And then continue to make one single crochet stitch in each and every stitch, and remember to insert the needle only into the front loop, leaving the back loops. This type of format gives the nice partition in between the dumbbell side and the dumbbell center. Now here I am making the last single stitch of the 14th row, and I'll have 14 single crochet stitches by the end of this row. Now remove the stitch marker, make one single stitch and put the stitch marker back. Now continue to make one single crochet stitch in each and every stitch from row 15 to row 26. So 15 to 26, this will give the center part for the dumbbell. Once all the rows are completed, you can stuff the center part also. So for this, take a good amount of Fiberfill and stuff it into the center part of the dumbbell. Once it is holding the shape and good enough, let's continue to stitch the remaining project, the other side of the dumbbell. So for row 27, insert the needle into the front loop of the next stitch and again put the stitch marker back to mark the beginning of the next row, and then continue to make one single stitch in each and every stitch throughout the row, and this completes your 27th row with 16 single crochet stitches. So here also we are not doing any sort of increases, so the count will remain the same. Now make one single crochet stitch into the next stitch and put the stitch marker back. Here I just forgot to put the stitch marker, so that's one single stitch, and into the next stitch make an increase. Now continue to make this pattern throughout the row. So one single stitch followed by one increase, again one single stitch followed by one increase, and repeat this pattern throughout the row until you reach the starting point. And this completes your row 28 with 24 single crochet stitches. Now remove the stitch marker, make one single stitch and put the stitch marker back, and this marks the beginning of 29th row. Into the next stitch make one more single stitch. So here you have two single stitches, and then into the next stitch make an increase. So that's two single stitch and increase, and repeat this pattern throughout the row until you reach the starting point. Here I am making the last increase of row 29, and this completes the 29th row with 32 single crochet stitches. Now remove the stitch marker and into the next stitch make one slip stitch. Now chain one and put the needle into the back loop of the first stitch and then make a single stitch. Now put the stitch marker into this stitch to mark the beginning of row 30, and now continue to make one single crochet stitch in each and every stitch throughout the row, and do not forget to insert the needle only into the back loops. So again this creates this border that is required for the shape to create the dumbbell third side, the third part of the dumbbell. After completing this row, you can see this border which is formed by leaving the front loops just like the previous one. Now remove the stitch marker, make one single stitch on the top of the first stitch and put the stitch marker back, and then continue to make one single crochet stitch in each and every stitch for row 31, 32, 33 and 34. So without any increases and decreases, making one single crochet stitch in each stitch, which will give 32 stitches in all these 4 rows. Now here I have completed the last stitch of row 34. Remove the stitch marker and then make one slip stitch into the next stitch, and now insert the needle, chain one and then insert the needle into the back loop of the first stitch and make one single stitch. Put the stitch marker into the first stitch to mark the beginning of 35th row, and then make one single crochet stitch into the back loops of each and every stitch throughout the row until you reach the starting point. So in 35th row also you will have 32 single crochet stitches, and because of leaving the front loops there will be a line which adds the detailing to the dumbbell. So once the 35th row is completed, remove the stitch marker, make one single stitch on the top of the first stitch and then put the stitch marker back into the first stitch, and this marks the beginning of row 36. Now continue to make one single crochet stitch in each and every stitch throughout the row. So in row 36 also you will have 32 single crochet stitches. Now remove the stitch marker and let's start making row 37. Make one single stitch and then put the stitch marker to mark the beginning of row 37. Now into the next stitch make one single stitch. So you have 2 single crochet stitches, and now into the next 2 stitches make one invisible decrease. So insert the needle into the front loops of both the stitches and make an invisible decrease. Now repeat this pattern of 2 single crochet stitches and 1 invisible decrease throughout the row until you reach the starting point. Here I am making the last invisible decrease of row 37, and by the end of this row you will have 24 single crochet stitches. And see the shape, it's the third part of the dumbbell. Now remove the stitch marker and let's start making row 38. Make one single stitch and put the stitch marker back, and this marks the beginning of row 38. So once one single stitch is completed, next make one decrease, again one single stitch and one invisible decrease, and repeat this pattern throughout the row until you reach the starting point. So by the end of row 38 you will have 16 single crochet stitches. Now it's time to add the stuffing to the third part of the dumbbell. You can see the shape, isn't it cute? Now before we close the project, let's add stuffing here. Take a good amount of Fiberfill and ensure you add good stuffing through the borders and then add the stuffing in the center. Now remove the stitch marker and let's start making the last row for this project. Begin with an invisible decrease. Put the stitch marker on the top of the first stitch, and this marks the beginning of 39th row. Now continue to make invisible decrease throughout the row. That's the second one, and then the third invisible decrease, and likewise 5 more times until you reach the starting point. So total you will have 8 invisible decreases. So once all the invisible decreases are done, remove the stitch marker and make an slip stitch into the first stitch of 39th row, chain 1, and then trim the excess thread by leaving a long tail end, and this long tail end is used to give the detailing that is required for the dumbbell shape. So as you can see, there is a little rounded edge on both the sides. To give the flat shape, we are going to use a tapestry needle. I am going to show how it is done. Now insert the tail end into the tapestry needle and draw the yarn through the front loops of all the 8 stitches in row 39. Now pull this tail end gently so that the opening will be closed. Now make a knot, and now using a long tapestry needle, draw the thread from the center of the first dumbbell side to the magic ring side as shown in the video. Now pull the thread out gently so that the rounded side of the dumbbell will take the flat shape. Now adjust the thread so that you can ensure the shape is good on both the sides, and repeat the same process on the other side as well. To secure the shape, I am just making a knot on one side, and now pulling this tail end from the magic ring side to the last row, the row 39, the closing side. Again make one more knot on the other side to ensure the shape is proper on both the sides. You can see that in the video. Just insert the needle from the top end corner to the bottom end corner, and make sure you adjust the stuffing once the detailing is done on both the sides. Now make a knot on the other side as well, and this holds the shape of the dumbbell perfectly. And once the knotting is done, hide the tail end into the project and then trim the excess thread. Adjust the stuffing, and that's it. Your cute dumbbell is now ready. Please check the description for the written pattern for this dumbbell. I hope you all enjoyed watching this tutorial. Do give this pattern a try and let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. See you all in the next video. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, share it, and subscribe to DIY Crafts.